All right. So just recap quickly. Today we're carrying on with the third in the series of Back to Basics, which is the series I started on 2 months ago. This is in line with the third Sunday being a return to tradition, you could say a traditional thought. And today we'll be on the Heart Sutra, the third of the three of the series so far. And depending on whether Shinjin is ready, willing, and able to step in next month, I may do a fourth next month on the lifespan chapter from the Lotus Sutra, which was said to be Buddha's last teaching. So that's probably what will be a series of four. We do that. So, the first one again was the first sermon laying out the Eightfold Path. The middle way starts out, we do an oral recitation, so you will follow along with me, not on this one, but just so you understand where it's coming from. The first lines were, "O monks, thus have I heard," which is a way of validating what we're going to say. In other words, I'm not making this up, but Buddha actually said this. "Thus have I heard, um, the Blessed One was once living in Deer Park. There he addressed 5 fellow monks. O monks, these two extremes ought not be followed by one going forth from the household life. What are the two? There's devotion to the indulgence of self-gratification, which is low, common, the way of ordinary people, unworthy and unprofitable. There is devotion to the indulgence of self-mortification, which is painful, unworthy, and unprofitable. Avoiding both these extremes, the Tathagata has realized the middle way. It gives vision, it gives knowledge, it leads to calm, to insight, to awakening, to nirvana. What is the middle way? Simply the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right thought, speech, action, livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right meditation. This is the middle way realized by the Tathagata. It gives vision, it gives knowledge, and it leads to calm, to insight, to awakening, to nirvana. It's like that as repeated parts because these were chanted. These teachings were all chanted. So it goes on like that for some time. And the Metta Sutra is more like this is what may be accomplished by the one who is wise, who seeks the good and has obtained peace. It talks about the personal and social dimensions of the benefits of the practice that we can accomplish through it. And again, it was by that time he had hundreds of monks and nun followers, apparently, according to the story. And the backstory on this Metta Sutra, or Loving Kindness Sutra, there's a loving kindness meditation where you sort of embrace yourself with all your failings and problems and so forth, and you embrace your loved ones, family, and friends, and colleagues at work, and so forth. Larger and larger expansion, concentric circles is the concept. So that you finally include people you don't like, you include eventually all the beings in the world. The Metta Sutra is an expansive kind of loving kindness for the whole world. And the backstory is that there were so many monks and nuns that the trees were unhappy, quote unquote. That is, they were causing an ecological problem in the forest because they all lived in the forest in those days. This was apparently before their patrons started building them buildings. They would go into the caves. You may have heard the story during monsoon or rainy season for what is called an ango, a practice period, 3 months. You still have that same practice period tradition carried into modern practice. For 3 months, you can come and live at the Zen Center and undergo what is called ango. So today we're taking up the Heart Sutra, which we just chanted the English version of it, and I will go into the weeds somewhat on it by my commentary. And looking to see if something's here. It is. Very good. I paraphrase the Heart Sutra, and I wanted to be able to read that to you, and I forgot to bring it. So I put it on my phone here. I get some better glasses. Okay. So let's do the oral tradition as we do with each of these. I am going to go through the sutra that we just chanted. In fact, I'll pick up our sutra book and use the exact wordings that we have here. And the way this works You follow along as best you can. It's not exactly the call he's following. But in the old days, before any of it written down, in Buddha's time, they said it was some 400 years before anything was committed to paper, and they were actually large leaves that they wrote the first sutras on. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is apparently language was limited, education in language was limited, education in reading was limited. And Sanskrit, as I understand it, was primarily for business, keeping records and things of that nature. And Buddha spoke in Pali. Pali is almost like a what do we call it, a dialect of Sanskrit, very similar. For instance, Buddha Dharma Sangha, Sanskrit, Buddham Dhammam Sangam is Pali. And still spoken in a few villages in India today. So we have to remember, I think, that we're dealing with a lot of history, 2,500 years. We're dealing with a lot of transition from language to language, from culture to culture. So people get a little anxious and aggravated about it. But because they, well, the sutra I learned where I come from, even, was different. Well, of course, it was a different interpretation, different translations. I have this sutra book or collection of heart sutras that I have collected over the years in English. Has probably 36, 35 or 40 different versions of the Heart Sutra in English. And these are all from different locations, starting with the Chicago Zen Temple where I first practiced in the 60s, and then into Pocowan in Hawaii, San Francisco Zen Center, and so forth, Austin Zen Center in Austin, Texas. So I've got lots of variations on it. And one of the practices we encourage is to do comparative translations, that is, especially with somebody like Dogen Zenji. When we study one of his fascicles or chapters, it's a good idea to have a second English version to compare sort of line by line. And we've even put them in grids and print them out. So if you're interested in studying them, Dogen is pretty difficult for most people, pretty dense. And reading different translators' versions of the same stanza, the first stanza, you can kind of read between the lines and get at what Dogen was trying to say in 13th century Japanese, which many Japanese cannot read today. So let's do this in a call response, but try to catch up as quickly as you can when you hear me saying the words. Sandra, you had a word for that in music. What is it called?
I've been trying to find the exact word. It's really close to just say we're going to be following you by rote.
By what?
By rote. By speech. Like you will notice as he does it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be just a little behind him because we also do this in Scottish.
And this is the way it was done because none of this was written down. You had to go join a bunch of monks and nuns chanting to even hear these teachings. And in order to learn them, you had to chant them again and again and again so that you began to memorize them. And that's what happens with repetition. Repetition is key. In Zazen, it's key to music, it's key to learning anything, athletics, sports, and so forth, repetition. But it can get a little trying on the nerves. So we encourage you to come back on Sundays and join in the chanting. My teacher would always say, chant with the ears, not with the mouth. In other words, just listen to what everybody's saying and try to synchronize yourself into that chanting. So, Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom, we're just going to recite this. We're not going to chant it. Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra, and the priest always chants the title and it's calling instruct. So we begin with Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Naturally, it would be a Sanskrit name, right? So that's the first line. So follow as well as you can. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. When deeply practicing prajna paramita, clearly saw that all five aggregates are empty, and thus relieved all suffering. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself form. Sensation, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, given emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of mind consciousness. There is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, neither old age and death nor extinction of old age and death. No suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on prajna paramita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on prajna paramita and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore know the Prajnaparamita as the great miraculous mantra, the great right mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable mantra, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the Prajnaparamita mantra, the mantra that says, Gate, Gate, Parasam Gate, Bodhisvaha. So you'll notice that, well, let me ask you what you noticed. Anybody, what you noticed as we went through it that way. I don't want to tell you what you noticed. I noticed that Naya, right? Ayana, closed your eyes. So if you're trying to focus on a beautiful piece of music, right, you're listening to something beautiful, you close your eyes up and listen to the music so that you're not distracted by vision. Hang on.
I noticed I knew more than.
Oh, you said again?
Yeah, I realized I knew more. I had more memorized than.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing about memorization. There was a turning point. The Japanese was harder to learn.
Yeah.
And there was a turning point where I just heard the Japanese coming out of my brain, out of my mouth, or coming from somewhere, but I wasn't conscious that I had memorized. I was chanting the Japanese without missing a beat. English is a little easier, but I think that's a characteristic of memorization is it happens before you know it.
And there's some words I have no clue.
Like for instance.
Well, like really, that's not paramita,
Mhm.
Sanskrit words. I think I have.
Yeah, some words are chosen not to be translated because they, like the gate gate pada gate pada gate bodhisvaha at the end, that is considered a dharani or mantra sometimes, um, meaning this dharani has something like a spell, mystical power, the sound itself. So these were the sounds, of course, in Chinese, translated from Sanskrit, what they call, I think, transliteration was phonetic, and it sounds the same. And they were considered themselves, a dharani has a meaning of a vessel, can transport something, it can carry something. You can fill a vessel with water, carry water. So dharani are not typically translated. And there's some long ones like the Dahishin Dharani, Great Compassion Dharani, that's chanted entirely in Sino-Japanese, and it's very difficult to memorize that particular one. It's a string of syllables that don't make any sense to you. We tend to jump back and forth between the Japanese and the English, and so that we're chanting Japanese and chanting English alternatingly. So prajnaparamita means prajna is wisdom, and paramita, there are 6 paramitas, and they're sometimes called perfections. So you're perfecting wisdom. But we like to use the gerund form and say the perfecting of wisdom. So we understand it's a process that is ongoing and is not thought of as something achievable or that the point is to achieve it. It's more that the point is to practice it. So we practice the perfecting of wisdom by doing our meditation. And this whole sutra is said to be a testament to emptiness, pointing to what is called shunyata in Sanskrit, or emptiness, that you actually experience emptiness. And that caused a lot of confusion. Some teachers, the practice leader, our practice leader in Jacksonville, Florida, for instance, says we shouldn't even expose newcomers to this. It's too, and the Tibetans say that. They say don't teach newcomers emptiness. It's too abstract, or it's too weird, too woo-woo. So the Metta Sutra, for instance, is much more accessible. You know, there's a very little jargon in it. And in an ecumenical setting, it's very welcome. So typically, if we do a presentation at a Christian church or something of that nature, we'll feature something like the Metta Sutra. But that's what the whole Prajnaparamita body of teachings means, the perfecting of wisdom. And it's one of the Tripitaka, the three baskets of all the teachings. So anybody else? Anything? Don't be shy. Did you practice in Japan, in the Zen temple there?
Not really, but
Okay.
it's
Mm-hmm.
and you're familiar with the concept.
It's a little bit like Catholicism in Rome or in Italy. It's part of the woodwork. So, anybody have anything else that they wanted to ask about? Something that popped out about you, Dan? You're new. I can pick on you.
I'm just happy to be here.
Sort of what?
I'm just happy to be here.
Oh, I'm happy you're here too. Okay, so I want to point out a couple of things. Let me just sort of go quite line by line. But Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing Prajnaparamita, clearly saw the five aggregates to be empty, etc., thus relieved all suffering. The five aggregates of form, sensation, perception, what is called mental formations, consciousness, sometimes impulse. So we think of these as form as the material world in which we live, where we're all practicing and start. Sensation is the energetic level of that, of our reality. Perception is when the mind starts sorting it into categories. This is a sight, this is a sound, this is a smell, this is a taste, this is a touch. And much of that happens subliminally, which is not a conscious activity. There's an ancient model of the mind which has been improved upon by modern brain science, but still has a lot of relevance. So these five skandhas are aggregates. So form, feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. The way you want to think about it in your meditation, I think, is you begin sitting in form, and your body starts resisting. You feel pain in your legs, your back, and so forth. You adjust the posture, you adapt, repetition, repetition, repetition. Eventually, you become comfortable. Zazen, za means sit, zen means meditation or contemplation. Sitting in Zen posture. Zen sitting is not normal sitting. It's a very erect, upright posture like a cobra rising off the floor, very rigorous. And what it does, it allows everything else to relax. The body doesn't relax in the sense of slumping, but it comes into a kind of equilibrium, kind of a balance, physical balance, sometimes referred to as samadhi in a jargon term. Samadhi is a Sanskrit term. Balance, physical balance, from which comes emotional balance or centeredness, less anxiety, more calm, mental samadhi, more clarity, less confusion, especially about the teachings, what Buddhism is pointing at in your real life, and eventually social samadhi, less friction, more harmony in relationships, in your relationships. The idea is very simple. It starts with the physical, but it expands like the metta sutta or the metta meditation to eventually include all inclusive. Everything is included in it. So the whole universe is in samadhi, and you're joining this stillness, settling into this stillness. So when it says, it's kind of weird here in the beginning, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. Remember, this is Buddha talking to Shariputra, right? So it's as if he's channeling Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, who is a kind of a mystical figure in India, became Kuan Yin in China, Kannon or Kanzeon in Japan. Some people argue represent female, some male. And if you notice the iconography in Buddhism, statuary and the paintings and so forth, they're kind of androgynous. They look almost neither male nor female, or could be both. And then the look of the face, for instance, that statue of Buddha looks more like a Chinese person, right? So they tended to take up the look of the local people because Buddha is not Indian. Buddha is not limited to Buddhism is not limited to a culture. It cannot be captured in a cultural model. So all of us Americans are Buddha, and there have been some modern artists who've done Buddha statues that look like us. So the weird thing here is he's talking to Shariputra, but he's explaining what happened or happens with this bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means enlightening being. Again, the Jera, not enlightened being, enlightening being. They're going through the process of enlightening themselves and enlightening others. This is what a bodhisattva is. And we can all be a bodhisattva. Many of them are wearing scrubs today, in the medical community. That's what happened with Shariputra. When practicing prajnaparamita, practicing the perfection of wisdom. Other translations said when coursing in the deepest wisdom. I think what coursing means is like shooting the rapids, right? Coursing in the deepest wisdom. It's not a static thing. It's very dynamic and moving. So came to see directly that all five aggregates, all of these constituents, the five constituents that make up a sentient being, form, feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness, loosely translated, they're all empty and thus relieved of all suffering. What does that mean? He goes on to say, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. And we say, what do you mean? I have eyes, I have ears, tongue, body, mind, right? But it's preceded with this phrase, given emptiness, given shunyata, given the impermanence, imperfection, insubstantiality of everything, the ever-changing nature of reality, means that actually there is no such thing as the I. There's no such self-existent thing as form, sensation, perception. They're all connected and they all define and modify each other. And it's all changing. It's all impermanent. There's no single I floating out in space somewhere that exists separately. That's not part of a being. It's integrated into the rest of your body. So it's not as strange as it sounds. It's saying, given emptiness, given the rest of the story, we understand form. That's where we live. Appearance. We've learned this from childhood. The way Matsuoka Roshi used to say, people go through life with something missing. They don't know what it is, but they know it's missing, and they come to Zen to find it. I think what Buddhism points to is what's missing is the rest of the story. That yes, indeed, this is real. It's solid, et cetera, But as we understand from modern physics, there's more space than stuff here when you look at it on the microscopic level. We don't want to get too scientific just because of the woo-woo. But it says that we all know that there's something else to this. There's something going on that we're not quite getting. And so in the old days, they didn't have the science we have. This was all done on an intuitive level. What Buddha realized in his meditation was very close to what modern science has proven again and again and again. That there is nothing solid, substantial anywhere. It's all changing, it's all moving, it's all dynamic. Very frightening thing to think about. We want the stability of gravity. Gravity is actually acceleration, so it's not stable. We want the feeling of stability. We need that. So Buddha's right away, this teaching is saying, listen up, guys. Here's the way it is, like it or not. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself form. That's very much like E equals mc squared. Matter is energy. Energy is matter. One is, you could say, a larger category. Energy is a larger category into which matter is subsumed as impounded energy. So form is this that we experience, the solidity, et cetera, of our reality. Emptiness is the changing nature of it, the dynamic that is happening, but it's not permanent. And of course, it becomes very personal when you apply it to your own self, your own life, your own mortality. And all dharmas are marked by this emptiness. Dharma means Dharma being, the smallest particle in the universe to the greatest galaxy in the universe. Each of those is called a dharma. Dharma means law, Dharma means truth, the way things work, but it also means being. So all Dharma beings are marked by this emptiness. There's nothing that is exempt from this law or this principle. So in teaching emptiness, dukkha, which is translated often as suffering, which is a very human translation of dukkha, dukkha is just change. Galaxies colliding is dukkha. We're caught up in change. We take it personally, right? We don't like it. We want some things to stay the same. We would like to change things that are stubborn and won't change. So it becomes a problem for us, and we call it suffering. But I think it's better to think of dukkha as just change. We're caught up in this process of change, so forth. So in the original translation, we chanted in Chicago, and I have several copies. This is from the old days in the early 60s. This is the Hanya Shingo, which is the Japanese version. You can see that since they put some marks in here in red where the gongs go. This is very interesting if you're into language because he takes the kanji, the ideographs, and strings them along, and he gives you the pronunciation just underneath. So it's kanji zai bo satsu yo jing han ya hara mi ta ji sho ken go on do is sai ku yakushari shi and so forth. Very monosyllabic, and in English we try to chant it the same way. Our English is more like Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. It's more iambic pentameter. When we chant in English, we're kind of straining the language to fit the Japanese tempo. And then in the very first version that I was exposed to, it not only has the pronunciation on top now, kanji zai bo satsu gyo jing and so forth, and then underneath it, it has a rough English transliteration, and then the kanji at the bottom. So to my knowledge, this was put together by my senior Dharma brother in Chicago, and he joined a group of American priests who were trying to get an English version that we could chant so we could sort of understand what we're saying. Up until then, we chanted in Japanese. And a couple of things that this says, a couple of things that were unusual in this translation, it will go through no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no this and that, until we come to expression. And in some of the other translations from other lineages, you say until we come to, and sometimes it'll be expressed as all the rest. So they're not saying everything. They're using a phrase like all the rest to cover everything else in that category. And until we come to implies a kind of progress. So we start out with this form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. So all five aggregates are empty. Then we see the six senses, including mind, as the sixth sense is also empty. This phrase, until we come to, keeps popping up there. And finally, at the end, it says, until we come to know consciousness also. What does it mean to come to know consciousness? The implication is that when you're sitting on the cushion and you sit still enough, long enough, straight enough, everything adapts. You go through profound adaptation, sensory adaptation. The pain stops, the separation of your butt and the cushion goes away, it becomes a fuzzy boundary. The fuzzy boundary lines between all of your senses come into play. It all starts merging into a kind of unity. But in Zen, we don't assert that everything is one, that that's the truth, and that's a superior truth to the particular many. We say the most we can say is not two. That is, it's both the one and the many simultaneously. But you have to get used to this very uncomfortable idea of non-duality. Non-duality says duality is real as far as it goes, but it isn't the whole story. The complete story is also non-duality. The duality is both dual nature and non-dual at the same time, simultaneously. Very difficult to get our logical minds around. We want either or. It has to be this, it has to be that. And Buddhism will not allow you to think that or to maintain that. So all of this line of know this, know that, know this, know that, know this, know that, it goes back to an ancient Vedic practice, I think, or I think it's called neti, meaning not this, not that, not this, not that. As things come to you in your meditation and you recognize this, you think, oh, this is it, no, that's it. This process says, just Matoper said, just cut through like the razor's edge, cutting through everything that comes. So if you think of that as this, not that, not this, not that, we're not really gaining anything in our practice. What we're doing is trying to strip away all of our concepts of reality until we can get down to what is truly real. So it's not this, not that, not this, not that, until finally there's something you can't say that. So nothing to attain, no path, no knowledge, no attainment. So here he's saying no path. Now this particular version of this sutra came out of China around 900, according to Red Pine or Bill Porter, who's a scholar translator, goes back to the ancient texts, and he wrote a book on the Heart Sutra, which he came here and previewed with us. And while he was writing it, he and I got to be pretty good friends. And he said that the reason they did this, the reason they put this one out, it's very brief, it's like a Reader's Digest condensed version of the larger Vajrasattva Sutra, the larger Heart Wisdom Sutra collection, which is large. So it's almost as if each phrase in here could have an underline, it could be a link, and if you clicked on it, it would take you to a different sutra, different teaching. So this is sort of like everything put into one. And he said the reason they did it is at that time in China, which had happened more than once, Zen was going into the ditch on the emphasis on erudition, memorization, scholarship, and whoever could quote the most sutras was the most enlightened. Now you had Huineng, sixth patriarch in China, long time before that. Probably I don't remember where he comes, but very much earlier. He is the third of the sixth patriarch after Bodhidharma, down to six generations. He was fully enlightened without any training, no teaching, and he made a big point of burning the sutras publicly one day. And in those days they were probably extremely valuable because the only way you could get a copy was to copy it. So he makes a public display of burning sutras out in public to make the point that that's not where the Dharma is. The Dharma is in your experience. And Dogen comes along in China, 13th century, and says, but it's actually also in here too. So it's a more balanced middle way. But Buddhism had gone off the ditch into this emphasis. And so this was published to remind everybody, kind of a corrective, that Buddha said even his teachings were subject to impermanence, emptiness. Even his teachings were not cast in concrete. You have to experience what he's talking about here to begin to even understand it. So it's not in the words so much. And the Chinese replicate this. The meaning does not reside in the words, but a pivotal moment brings it forth. It's a famous line from the Chinese poem. Nonetheless, these words point the way. So let me pause there for a moment, have a sip and see if anything I've said has triggered something somebody wants to bring up. John, we can join you online. We will do another recitation a little bit later, but let's pause for questions, comments.
I have a question.
Oh, here we have one in-house.
Yeah, and ask. So when you say this, and my understanding of this has to do with there's nothing constant for change. Like if you're like in town, like I don't know, 30 years ago, there's something you get around. It's not go home again. They can't go home again. So even like, our body, you said we're back to our life, we're going to die one day. If you get scientific, look at the earth, the life cycle of a star. When our star, something the red giants thing, how you get to the earth. So is that kind of what you mean by emptiness?
And the three marks of Duke are aging, sickness, death, impermanence, imperfection, insubstantiality. So marks.
Impermanence and change.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And when you say attachment means to suffering, do you mean like, if I get really attached to my job, I can get laid off? Or, like if we're on the news, something like on the news, we go Hollywood 24, it's clothing.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I exploded when I was younger. But if you're emotionally attached to that, it's going to go away one day.
Right. Or you could say it's attachment to your opinion of suffering, attachment to your concept of it. I don't think Buddha taught us to have non-attachment to life. Mom gets mad at the kids because they run in the street and they might get run over by a car. And I know I need to let that go. No, Mom, you're a mom. You're in for suffering. So we embrace suffering. We embrace suffering in Buddhism. We're not trying to avoid it, but it's our concept of it that I think Buddhism is encouraging us to let go of. Become unattached to your own opinion, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, and so forth. And that way you have an opportunity to see it not in a prejudicial way, or not in a preconceptual way, but just as what it is, including impermanent, imperfect, so forth. Anything else? Yes, Dan.
Okay, so,
It's a dose.
well, I'm personally struggling with gaining perspective on something very specific. Like I'm having trouble. How does this relate to like the life that I lived before finding the Dharma and the self arising that comes with like the shame of like harm that I've caused,
Oh, yeah.
and how that relates to interacting with other people and like what would amends look like in this perspective of emptiness and change and
A very good question, and glad you brought that up because there's another point I wanted to make. Remember at the beginning of the service today, we did all my past and harmful karma born from beginningless greed, hate, delusion through body, speech, and mind. I now live about through body, mouth, and mind. And I have a little quibble with this because I think the original version that we would chant would say all my past and harmful karma arising from beginningless greed, anger, and delusion, born of body, mouth, and mind. I now live out. I fess up. I admit. I confess. I admit to it. So it's repentance, refuge. Then we take refuge in the three treasures. So think about that. Born of body, mouth, and mind. It means it comes with the territory. Most of the desires that you've been trying to fulfill come from the body. The body needs water, it needs food, it needs sex, drugs, rock and roll. Right? The mind needs status, we need prestige, we need wealth, we need all these, new car this year, old car isn't good enough. All the stuff that we're pursuing like idiots, maniacs running around, comes from being incarnated, comes from being, so it comes with the territory. It's not really our fault exactly. But it's our responsibility what we do with it, what we do about it. It's our responsibility. And so it starts with recognizing the problem. I recognize that all my past and harmful karma, or evil karma sometimes, we don't, evil is a little too laden. I now fully avow, I own up to it. in the old days, apparently in the monasteries, they would actually confess to the specific thing they had done that month that caused some problem in the monastery. And then everybody would like forgive them, I guess. And it was a way of living in a hothouse kind of artificial community or intentional community and being able to get along. So when you did something and you had an opportunity to confess to it and make amends in that way. We don't have much of that anymore, right? In our cultural system and the societal system. Some people look at the political thing that way. We can vote them out of office. We can vote them into office. We can make amends. We can do good work. You know. But in Buddhism, it begins with you on the cushion, facing this dilemma, facing the problem, recognizing where your behavior is coming from, right? Behavior you might not approve from a social level. And then being able to embrace it for what it is. It's in design. I come from a design background, commercial and graphic design, and so forth, industrial design. First order of business is defining the problem correctly. If you're not defining the problem correctly, your solutions to it aren't going to be very good. So Buddhism is all about defining the problem of existence. And where is this coming from? Born of body, mind, and mind. Comes with the territory. That makes sense?
Yes, I have that deep understanding. I think my problem is integrating this perspective with, like, integrating my awareness of who I am now with, like, whenever I run into people, I'm realizing that I still feel this deep self shame rising,
Sure, sure.
and it almost feels like me making amends would
Right.
alleviate that self and also alleviate the self that would be arising due to the harm that I was causing of the other person.
Right.
Um,
And we have formalized versions of this, like the AA 12-step program, things like that, or how to try to make amends. But there are cases where you can't. It's too late. The person is dead or whatever. There's nothing you can do. You can't go back to the past. And according to Buddhism, the first thing is to make amends with yourself. To get over this yourself. Take care of yourself on the cushion. Get right with God. Come into alignment, harmony with reality, Taoist principle. And once you do that, then your behavior from here on out can become non-karmic. It can become, in the sense of obsessive compulsive behavior, that is blindly creating all kinds of problems for you and everybody else.
right. And I guess my experience is that it doesn't feel like because I feel like until I somehow find a way to make peace with the outer,
Right.
not just with myself, it's getting in the way of my personal practice.
Right. And this is why people in the early days, you had to leave society behind. You had to give up your family, give up your fortune, give up your inheritance, give up your status, your prestige, your place in society, and join the order. When you join the order, you left all that behind. And it's called renunciation. And monks were capable of different levels of renunciation that Dogen talks about. Some could renounce their family, some couldn't. Some could renounce their family and all of that, but they could not renounce their health, could not put their life on the line for this practice, and so forth. So they're like sort of levels of renunciation that you can do. But the question you're asking, I think, is what do you now do about it? And the Bodhisattva vow is to help all other beings. When you think about, and we say, in fact, we close this with the Bodhisattva vows, we'll chant 4 times so you hear them at the end. Save all beings. Raise the question, where do I begin? How many are there? How long is it going to take? It's like this infinite thing opens up in front of you. And you have to start by saving yourself. You have to put your oxygen mask on first. So we meditate in order to free ourselves, liberate ourselves from all the confusion we have about this. You can run out and try to do something do-gooder, but if you're off base, if you haven't really resolved it within yourself, you're just going to create more problems. So the solution is in Zen is hie thee to the cushion. Right? Sit your butt on the cushion in the corner there without the dunce cap. Eventually, with repetition, you will cut through all of the crap. You'll get to the bottom of everything. Get rid of the baggage you're carrying. Doesn't mean that you've absolved those crises that you created. You'll have to go back and do something about that, but you will be able to do that if you're okay with yourself. If you're beating yourself up with guilt, you can't really function properly. You come to the right place. And you finally found the right practice. I have to leave it at that because, John, do you have somebody? Are you somebody, John?
Well, there are moments when I'm somebody and moments when I'm nobody, and sometimes when I'm caught confusingly somewhere in the middle.
That's my favorite line. Emily Dickinson.
We've got a hand up.
I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Don't tell them. They'll banish us,
We had a hand up from Joseph this morning.
All right.
Yeah, how boring to be somebody, right? How dreary it would be. Sorry, no, that's such a beautiful poem. I'm really glad you brought it up. I was just struck by the symmetry, I guess, between Heart Sutra and Metta Sutra, right? Like, Heart Sutra sort of sending this impounded light into your interiority, whereas Metta is sort of radiating it outward. It's sort of this. It's the same operation. It's just sort of which direction. And I guess
Right.
Like Metta definitely is more about how do I settle with the world around me? How do I calm down the raging forest around me and rediscover the chirping birds and the calm? Metta Sutta is basically, to my mind, it's like something you say, to calm the forest around you. When it's dangerous
We're doing Jukai this year in November. Jukai is initiation ceremony, and everybody is welcome to undergo Jukai Dan. You take the precepts, you receive the first 5 precepts, taking up the way of not killing, taking up the way of not stealing, taking up the way of not lying, and so forth. And these are reminders to us, and I say we observe them by breaking them. It's when we find ourselves discussing the faults of others, that, oh, there I go again. And you recognize the precept, you recognize the problem, and it reinforces the precept. So through repetition, all of these teachings begin to sink in finally, and you find yourself seeing yourself in the mirror of Zen and the way you behave and the way everybody else is behaving. And you begin to realize it's not all your fault. I mean, you would be God, or you would be, Superman or something if it were all your fault. It's only maybe 50% your fault. They're a whole full human being as well. So 50% of the onus is on them. Most of the onus is on us. At least 50%.
And all the causes and conditions that led to myself arising in this moment.
Yeah. But we take responsibility for our birth, even though we can blame our parents if we want to. We can blame anything. But blaming doesn't help. And the blaming starts, there's no end to the blame, according to Taoism. It's an infinite regress. So we may as well assume responsibility and get on with it, do it as best we can.
So I'm assuming it's like what you said about the both and. It's like I'm aware that I am emptiness.
Right.
And at the same time, I'm taking responsibility for the self that is arising in this moment.
Right. Even though some people try to use this idea of emptiness as license to kill. I can do anything. Doesn't matter. No, you'll find out. So anybody else online? We switch back and forth.
Tatsuro.
I'll make a comment and ask for your comment. The phrase prajna paramita, In
What
the
is it?
beginning of my practice sounded exotic. I think it's usually capitalized. I thought of it as something to achieve or that I would get, as I became wiser. But I think, and then as I have practiced more, especially with this group, I think prajnaparamita is just, it's ordinary. I call it like ordinary wisdom. It's not a big construction. It's simple.
Yeah, natural, you could say. Natural wisdom, maybe.
Yeah.
Sokan was an early Rinzai master, and he studied Christianity and Judaism because all the people came to the New York location that he occupied didn't know anything about Buddhism. And he studied Judaism and Christianity. He said, the way he kind of summed it up, he said, Buddha came along some 2,500 years ago, taught a kind of wisdom and compassion that requires the surrender of the self. So it's not ordinary. I mean, it's not ordinary in that sense. Surrendering the self is the hard part, but that's the only way you can accede to this wisdom and compassion the Buddha taught. He said Jesus came along 500 years later and taught a kind of divine love that closed the system, closed the teaching, and also requires the surrender of the self. So he said the great commonality between the two great systems is one must surrender the self. There's no other possibility. So that's really what you have to quote, do. But it turns out we can't do that. All we can do is try. It has to get to the point that we see that there is no self to surrender, so forth. So it's almost like every one of these teachings is a catch-22. You just have to trust in mind, your original mind, jump in both feet and just do it. Nike's in.
Well, it's like the fear that comes up is this idea that I have self to preserve.
No,
And like this idea that I have self to preserve.
yeah, that's the fall from grace in Buddhism.
By facing the fear, it's like getting rid of them.
One of the great poems says, in this world of suchness, there is neither self nor other than self. So it's not that there is no self, it's just that the self that you are constructing is a very limited,
It's not separate.
it's not the big self, right? So was that it, Cuts? Is that good enough on that? But the paramitas, they start with dana. Dana paramita. Dana means generosity. And most of the old schools say, teach people dana first. If they can learn to be generous with their time, support the sinner, help out, generous with other people, take good care of their family, if they can learn generosity first, then the rest of them, easy teasy. So the next is Sheila. The way I remember it is Donna Sheila. It's Donna Sheila. Remember Donna Sheila? Donna and Sheila's precepts sometimes translate. Bill, you're shaking your head. I saw that. They translate that as morality, but in Buddhism, I think it's just ethical behavior. The precepts are ethical behavior. And as I said, we observe them breaking. You say, oh, there I go again. Try again. So Dana, Sheila, Shanti, I think, is next. Patience. We practice patience. Virya may have come first. Virya is effort, endurance, vigorousness, energy. Virya. And then finally, jhana. Jhana is contemplation. It's like, and there's said to be four primary jhanas, four levels of contemplation. And I have a little second point on that. And finally, prajna. Prajna is the sixth of the six paramitas. The prajna, or wisdom, is understood as the result of what comes about naturally if you practice the other five. Right? And jhana, meditation, is closest to wisdom. It's the fifth. So you say, yes, if you can practice dana, shila, if you can practice generosity, precepts, endurance, forbearance is sometimes called when people treat you badly. You say, negative bodhisattva, I get your message. You're teaching me the Dharma in a way I don't appreciate, but I get it. You know, that's the endurance. And finally, jhana, meditation, which is whole body, pedal to the metal, jump in both feet, throw yourself into it completely. That's jhana. And finally, prajna. Prajna comes from the mix of all of those things happening in your life, coming together. You can't force it. You can't make it happen. You can't do it intellectually, according to Zen. That makes sense, Kutz?
Yeah, yeah.
Good, good.
Lots of good
Starting to worry.
guidelines, training.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Look at big goes. I mean, how it's
Your you have a interpretation of on the screen.
I do. Let me see if I can read it well.
You've read it before. And
I read the paraphrase.
I believe so.
But good.
I cannot recall
I didn't even remember.
if you were going to read that.
Yeah, let me try it. Let me see if I can get it up here and if I can see it. Okay, here we go. It could be helpful if you have a copy to look at. Keiko, could we distribute the Heart Sutra so that everybody can look at the copy while I'm reading this? This is what I meant by comparative studies, comparative translation. One good exercise is to have somebody, I do this in my online Dharma dialogues. Somebody will have a translation they're reading from a book, and I will recite a translation that they don't have. And they follow with their eyes, they follow the translation they do have. With their ears, they're hearing this other translation. So one is coming in through the ears, audio cortex, the other coming in through the visual cortex. So they sort of blend together in new meaning. So this is going to be very far removed from that in the sense that what we mean by paraphrase is we're trying to say what they were trying to say in the modern idiom, meaning not just language, but also cultural. So here we go. I mean, the title I chose, and this is the first draft, I could probably go back to it and work on it some more. Okay. Essential teaching of perfecting wisdom. When awakening beings deeply and directly experience perfecting wisdom, they clearly see that all five components of sentient awareness are fundamentally empty of permanent, separate self-existence. This relieves all unnecessary suffering. Respected seekers of the truth, the apparent form of our world does not differ from its emptiness. Its emptiness or impermanence does not differ from its form. Form itself is innately emptiness. Emptiness innately form. All sensation, perception, and underlying mental formations, as well as consciousness itself, are also like this. They neither arise nor cease as they appear to do. They are neither defiled nor pure, but non-dual in their nature. They neither increase nor decrease in terms of their merit. Therefore, given the non-dual reality we call emptiness, there is no fixed form, no tangible sensation, no persistent perception, no infallible formations. Finally, there is no absolute consciousness as an entity. More immediately, the principle of emptiness entails that there exist no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue as such, and thus no body. Likewise, there can be no mind or separate substance. It follows that in spite of appearances, there can be no independent functions of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or touching. No sensory object of the mind, no realm of sight or any other sense organ, nor any realm of mind consciousness as a whole. This means that there can be neither ignorance in the absolute sense, nor any absolute extinction of ignorance in the relative sense. Neither can there be sickness, old age, and death as absolute states, nor any extinction of sickness, old age, and death as relative states. In light of this non-dual reality, suffering intentionally inflicted upon oneself or others can end, stemming as it does from confusion as to root causes, while aging, sickness, and death are natural and cannot end. Change appearing to occur in the empty world we see as real only because of our ignorance. By the way, that's a quote from a Chinese poem. Thus, there can be no isolated path leading to cessation of suffering. There can be no isolated path leading to cessation of suffering. No knowledge to gain in any conclusive sense, and no attainment of any conceptual kind. Since there is nothing to attain, awakening beings rely on perfecting wisdom. Their body, mind, fully functions with no hindrance. With no hindrance, there is no root of fear. Far beyond confused worldviews, they abide in absolute spiritual liberation. All awakening ones of past, present, and future rely on perfecting wisdom, thereby attaining unsurpassed, complete insight. Rest assured that perfecting wisdom is the most excellent method. The illuminating discipline, the unsurpassable system, the incomparable means of mitigating all suffering, and that this claim is true, not false. We proclaim the transformational perfecting of wisdom. Gone to the other shore, attain the other shore, altogether beyond the other shore, having never left. That's the wisdom perfected. So that's the gate at the end. My Dharma brother in Chicago added the having never left.
Is there somewhere that we can find that?
Yeah, send me an email and I'll send it to you. It's just trying to put what I understand the Heart Sutra is trying to say into conventional terms and idiom. So let's do one more. Let me pass this out. There are 4 copies here. Let's see, 2, 3, 4. Why don't you pair up and each of you look at a copy together? Pass those on down. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. These are different translations used at different locations. And while you're looking at those, And the rest of y'all, take one out of here just at random. Just in the middle here, you'll be fine. Just give one to Keiko and give one to, give one. You guys are paired up on it? Uh, yeah. If we just pair up together. Yeah, good. Okay. Give Keiko one. And we're good. Okay, so this is one that I remember from Chicago. There were several iterations, but this one does not have the until we come to, which I remember clearly. But while I read this one out loud, look at that one with your eyes. Read it with your eyes. Can you see?
I don't have my glasses. I can't see it.
Oh, okay. we're all cyborgs these days. Okay, the Great Heart of Wisdom Sutra. When Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion, was practicing the deepest wisdom, he clearly saw that the five aggregates are empty, thus transcending distress and suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness no other than form. Form is exactly emptiness. Emptiness exactly form. Feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness are likewise like this. O Shariputra, remember, Dharma is fundamentally emptiness, no birth, no death. Nothing is pure, nothing is defiled. Nothing can increase, nothing can decrease. Hence, in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No seeing, no realm of no seeing, no hearing, no smelling, no tasting, no touching, no thinking, no realm of sight, no realm of thought, no realm of no ignorance and no end of ignorance, no old age and death and no end to old age and death, no suffering, no craving, no extinction, no path, no wisdom, no attainment. Indeed, there is nothing to be attained. The bodhisattvas live this deepest wisdom with no hindrance in the mind. No hindrance, therefore, no fear. Far beyond delusive thinking, they finally awaken to complete nirvana. All Buddhas, bodhisattvas of past, present, and future live this deepest wisdom, and therefore reach the most supreme enlightenment. Therefore know that this wisdom beyond wisdom is the greatest dharani, the brightest dharani, the highest dharani, the peerless dharani. It completely ends all suffering. Know this as truth and do not doubt. So set forth this profound wisdom dharani. Set forth this dharani and declare, gone, gone, gone to the other shore, attain the other shore, to beyond the other shore, having never left. Wisdom Heart Sutra. So the having never left part was what Kongo Roshi, my Dutch senior members, was added. I also wanted to say a couple things that I remember. The until we come to. I like the phrase live this deepest wisdom. We manifest wisdom, we don't understand it.
The running,
Again?
the running means. What is the running?
Dharani is, as I said before, a vessel. Mantra is more something you recite, at least in transcendental meditation. But dharani, I think, may be a more appropriate term. It means a vessel that has the power to transport you to the other shore. So we say samsara is this everyday saha world of patience, trying our patience, stumbling, uh, making mistakes, etc. Nirvana represents the liberation from all that. So it's often spoken as the other shore. We cross to the other shore on the raft Buddha's raft, the raft of Buddhism. Once we're on the other shore, we can set the raft aside. But in Okamoto Roshi, one of my teachers, was here, and he said, everybody says they want to go to Nirvana. Everybody, let's go to Nirvana. He said, but you go to Nirvana and there's nobody there. because only bodhisattvas can go to nirvana, and they choose to stay here. So he said, our charge is to turn samsara into nirvana. One of Hockman's poems said, this earth where we stand is the pure lotus land, meaning nirvana. And this very body, the body of Buddha. That's why they say a step toward it is a step away from it. That's why we center ourselves on the cushion. The supreme teaching is free, so why study the means to attain it? The way is completely where you are. So of what use traveling, looking for it or pursuing enlightenment elsewhere? It has to be right here. If it's anywhere, it's here. So nirvana is this idea of dharani is the power of this repetition practice to transport us. As Dogen says elsewhere, actually, nirvana comes to us. We don't go to the other shore. It comes to us. It manifests here. Okay, so that's quite a bit of time on that. We're almost at noon. Let's do a wrap up. Any kind of wrap up questions, comments? Rico, did you have anything?
No.
Keiko-san.
Thank you very much.
You chanted Hanya Shingo in Japan, right?
Yes, yes. Well, it's a very popular chant, so almost all of the sects.
I think
What
one.
does it mean by gate, gate,
Say it again.
gate, right here? What does it mean?
What is it again?
Gate,
Yeah, gate, gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhisattva. Again, it's usually not translated. When as we have translated here, gone, gone, gone to the other shore, attain the other shore, enlightenment accomplished.
It comes from Pali or
It was originally, who knows, Sanskrit or Pali, gone to the other shore. It's called a dharani or a mantra, and usually, again, not translated. So if anybody is interested, we'll keep the book here for a while, and you can sort of leaf through the book and look at these different ones. Put the back in the front. You have one, Kiko?
This one.
I don't know why I started doing this. It's just one of those compulsive things you do. Everywhere I go, they were happy to give them to me. They take their version of the truth home with me. But I'm glad I did, and I didn't realize I had so many. I thought I had maybe 15 or 20, but it's more like 30 or 40. Yeah, thanks. Let me pass this over. Anybody want to take a look at it? So closing comments or questions, John, online.
Anyone have a comment or a question?
Never ask a yes or no answer. Just say, what comment or question do you have now? You must have a comment or a question. What is it?
David, do you have a comment?
Oh, I'll just chime in and say I appreciated the comments about the non-dualism, about the distinction between dualism and non-dualism. And that's something that I remember, I think it was a Dokusan sensei when I was going through a rough time. And, it was regarding a relationship issue that's since been resolved. And I think the question was, well, what does David want? And I was like, wait a second, that's a very dualistic question to ask. And so I think that the final collapsing in on the distinction between dualism and non-dualism is again, it's a bit of a difficult one for at least my Western brain to conceptualize.
the Dharma of relationships or marriage, family, so forth is considered the most difficult of dharmas. And it's because of the attachment. You're so entangled karmically. And it is impermanent. But the good news is bad relationships are impermanent. The bad news is good relationships are impermanent.
Yeah.
Catch 22.
Yeah.
But at least accepting that, embracing it, and knowing it mitigates that kind of suffering to some extent. The intentional suffering that we inflict on ourselves and on each other, that can come to an end. I think you have to stop inflicting suffering on yourself first. Oxygen mask thing. So, any comments, anybody? Newcomers, this was your first impression. Don't let it be your last. It's never the same. Okay, if yes,
You're not gotten from today. Let me know if this makes sense or doesn't make sense. When we are in the point of preceding a moment, an action, we're sort of like at a middle spot between duality and non-duality. I'm not quite sure which side. I think being in time and living our lives would be the duality. And memory would be non-duality once it happens.
I'm not sure you can make that clear distinction. I think memories have been proven to be plastic. That is, they can be amplified, they can be embellished, they can be exaggerated. People can misremember things that happened, the way they happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was surprised I couldn't find the sutra that I remember chanting where it had that expression until we come to. I don't have it in my collection, but I definitely remember it. So people have PTSD where the memory takes over, right? And the bombs are falling and I'm in Vietnam again. And I think the thing that we can say is that it's like listening to Pavarotti sing an aria, you know, it can be very touching and emotional, even though it's a recording, right? And but it's not Pavarotti standing in a room singing the aria in there. So it's not as real as what's happening here at the moment, at this moment in the present. So if we can regard past trauma in particular and our own screw ups and everything that we regret, monkey mind business, if we can regard that as recording, you know, it's a very high fidelity recording in any case, but it's only a recording.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as real as what's happening now.
That's what I was wondering, because once it gets into memory, it becomes a record.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's happening moment by moment.
If we stay attached to it, we keep pulling it back into the causality of further actions if we keep repeating it, and we cause new things.
Yeah, it's called the Alaya Vijnana, the seed storehouse in the mind, where we plant seeds of future the activity that would grow and blossom. Mm-hmm. And we, to Dan's point, we try to learn to nurture those that will further, not nurture those that won't.
Yeah.
So the seeds are all there. They're gonna be there. But as we observe the precepts, as we get okay in our own skin and understand and accept our own folly and our own failures and foibles and so forth, then we can move forward with a degree of humility and at least not obsessively, compulsively keep committing the kind of atrocities we were committing when we were younger, mostly. So, and we never get younger; we're always getting older, right? And so the hope is there that you can actually. I wouldn't say Zen is not a self-improvement program, but you can certainly improve your reaction to those things you can and cannot do anything about.
Thank you, Sensei.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay, let's do the, you want to do the bell, Thunder? Do the closing chant. And Dan, this is where you'll hear the Four Great Vows, the vows of Bodhisattvas. These are not to be understood literally any more than the precepts are, because they're literally impossible. And they may be in your little booklet there. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you for your patience and listening. A couple announcements. We have rebooted our morning sit from 6 to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday. So you're welcome to join that any morning if you live in the neighborhood. A little more convenient. Good way to start the day. And Andrew Dietz and I are giving a writer's workshop, Zen writing workshop this month. I think it's the 21st. It's a Saturday from 9 to noon. So if you're interested in writing, we're not trying to teach you how to write. Most of the people who come to these are already professional writers. We sit, half an hour, we write for an hour. We sit for half an hour, we write for an hour, and so forth. And Andrew has some prompts he gives, and I have some word exercises coming from design background, media exercises in words, in English. And we do those as kind of set breakers or stimulus at one point. And then we have a lunch and learn. We order in pizza and we have lunch until 1 and talk about. At one point, we read to each other what we're writing. It's not too personal. If you're already working on something, bring it with you. Bring your laptop if that's the way you write. And first one we did was amazing. They were all professionals. I was the only one using laptop. I can't believe it. They're all writing by hand. But they say that that's important. So check out our schedule. Keep those cards and letters coming in. We'll see you next time. Thank you for your patience and listening. Next month, I'll talk to Mike and see if he's wants to volunteer, but if he doesn't, I'm going to do the lifespan chapter from the